Ladies and gentlemen, nobody's watching. Nobody's cheering. Nobody is clapping. Nobody even knows what you're doing. And that's exactly where champions are made. In the silence, in the darkness, in the lonely hours when it's just you and your grind. Silence doesn't just create discipline. Silence is discipline. And if you can't work when nobody's watching, you'll never win when everybody's looking. Right? Listen to me very carefully. The real work happens in silence. The real growth happens in solitude. The real transformation happens in isolation. Everything you see in public was built in private. Every victory you witness was forged in silence. Every champion you admire was shaped in the lonely hours when nobody was around to applaud, to encourage, to motivate, to validate. You want to know the difference between champions and everyone else? Champions have learned to love the silence. They've learned to embrace the loneliness. They've learned to thrive in the darkness. While everyone else needs crowds to stay motivated, champions need nothing but their vision and their will. While everyone else needs applause to keep going, champions need nothing but their discipline and their determination. Silence creates discipline because silence demons it. When there's no one around to push you, you have to push yourself. When there's no one around to motivate you, you have to motivate yourself. When there's no one around to hold you accountable, you have to hold yourself accountable. Silence strips away all the external factors and leaves you with the only thing that really matters, your character. And let me tell you something, your character is revealed in the silence. Your true nature is exposed in the lonely hours. Your real commitment is demonstrated when nobody's watching. Anyone can work hard when people are looking. Anyone can push when there's an audience. Anyone can grind when there's recognition. But can you do it when it's just you in that room, in that gym, in that office, at that desk, working on something that nobody else knows about or cares about? That's where discipline is born. That's where champions are made. That's where legends are forged. In the unseen grind, in the unnoticed effort, in the unrecognized sacrifice, in the silent hours when you're doing the work that nobody sees, making the progress that nobody knows about, becoming the person that nobody expects you to become. The world only sees the performance, but they don't see the preparation. They only see the victory, but they don't see the training. They only see the success, but they don't see the sacrifice. They only see the highlight, but they don't see the hour. And all of those hours, all of that preparation, all of that training, all of that sacrifice, it happens in science. You think Kobe Bryant became Kobe Bryant with people watching? No. He became Kobe Bryant at Seal Fam in an empty gym when the world was sleeping. You think Michael Jordan became Michael Jordan with crowds cheering? No. He became Michael Jordan in practice when nobody was there. You think any champion in any field became great because people were watching them work? No. They became great despite nobody watching. They became great because of the work they did in silence. Silence creates discipline because silence removes all the crutches. It removes the motivation of a crowd. It removes the energy of an audience. It removes the validation of recognition. It removes everything external and forces you to dig into that. It forces you to find that fire within yourself. It forces you to discover that drive that doesn't depend on anything or anyone outside of you. And that's the only kind of drive that lasts. External motivation is temporary. The crowd goes home. The audience leaves. The recognition fades. But internal motivation, internal drive, internal fire, that's permanent. That's sustainable. That's unstoppable. And you only discover that internal power in the silency. Let me ask you something. Can you work when nobody's watching? Can you grind when nobody knows? Can you push when nobody cares? Can you sacrifice when nobody notices? Can you discipline yourself when there's no external pressure? Because if you can't, you're not a champion. You're a permer. You're someone who only shows up when there's an audience. You're someone who only works when there's recognition. You're someone who only pushes when there's validation. But champions aren't performers. Champions are workers. They work regardless of who's watching. They grind regardless of who knows. They push regardless of who cares. They sacrifice regardless of who notices. They discipline themselves regardless of external pressure because their discipline comes from within. Silence creates discipline by creating choice. When nobody's watching, you could choose to quit and nobody would know. You could choose to slack off and nobody would notice. You can choose to cut corners and nobody would see. The silence gives you the freedom to fail without consequences. The silence gives you the option to quit without judgment. The silence gives you the permission to settle without criticism. And that's exactly why silence creates discipline, because in that moment of freedom, in that moment of choice, in that moment of temptation to quit, to slack, to settle, you choose to keep going anyway. You choose to maintain your standards anyway. You choose to do what needs to be done anyway. That choice, that decision to do the work when you don't have to maintain excellence, when nobody's checking, to stay disciplined when you could easily quit, that's where real discipline is born. Discipline isn't about what you do when people are watching. That's just performance. Discipline is about what you do when nobody's watching. That's character. Discipline is about the choices you make in silence, the decisions you make in solitude, the actions you take in. When it's just you and your goals, you and your dreams, you and your standards, what do you choose? The lonely hours reveal who you really are. The unseen grind exposes your true character. The silent sacrifices demonstrate your real commitment. You can talk about discipline all day long. You can post about your work ethic on social media. You can announce your dedication to everyone who will listen. But none of that means anything if you can't maintain that discipline in the silency. Silence creates discipline because silence is the stenting ground. It's where your words are tested by your actions. It's where your promises are tested by your performance. It's where your commitments are tested by your choices. The silence is where the rubber meets the road. It's where talk becomes walk. It's where theory becomes practice. It's where intention becomes action. And let me tell you what happens in those lonely hours. You discover what you're really made of. You find out if you're a talker or a doer. You learn if you're committed or just interested. You realize if you're disciplined or just motivated, because motivation fades, motivation disappears, motivation vanishes in the silence. But discipline? Discipline Cheops in the silence. Motivation needs external stimulation. It needs inspiration. It needs excitement. It needs energy from outside sources. But discipline doesn't need any of that. Discipline doesn't care if you're motivated. Discipline doesn't care if you're inspired. Discipline doesn't care if you're excited. Discipline just does what needs to be done, whether you feel like it or not. And that's why silence creates discipline, because in the silence, motivation can't help you. In the lonely hours, inspiration isn't there. In the unseen grind, excitement has abandoned you. All you have left is discipline. All you can rely on is your commitment to yourself. All you can depend on is your decision to do the work, regardless of how you feel. The sacrifices you make in silence are the most powerful sacrifices, because nobody's applauding them. Nobody's recognizing them. Nobody's validating them. You're making them purely because you decided they're necessary. You're making them purely because you know they're required. You're making them purely because you understand what it takes to be great. When you sacrifice sleep and nobody knows about it, that's discipline. When you sacrifice comfort and nobody sees it, that's discipline. When you sacrifice pleasure and nobody notices it, that's discipline. When you sacrifice immediate gratification for long-term gain and nobody recognizes it, that's real discipline. Because you're not doing it for recognition, you're doing it for results. Silence creates discipline by eliminating the noise, the opinions, the judgments, the expectations, the pressure, all the external noise that usually influences your decisions. It's gone in the silence. All the opinions that usually affect your choices, they're absent in the lonely hours. All the judgments that usually impact your actions, they're irrelevant in the unseen grind. In the silence, it's just you and the work. It's just you and your goals. It's just you and your standards. There's no external pressure telling you what to do. There's no external validation making you feel good. There's no external criticism making you feel bad. There's just you making the choice to be disciplined or not. And that's the purest form of discipline, the kind that comes from within, the kind that doesn't need external factors, the kind that exists independently of circumstances. That's the discipline that creates champions. That's the discipline that produces excellence. That's the discipline that generates greatness. You want to know how to develop that kind of discipline? Embrace the silencer. Stop avoiding the lonely hours. Stop running from the unseen grind. Stop seeking constant company and constant validation. Learn to be alone with your work. Learn to be comfortable with your grind. Learn to love the silence. Because in that silence, you'll discover powers you didn't know you had. In those lonely hours, you'll develop strength you didn't know you possessed. In that unseen grind, you'll forge character you didn't know you could build. Silence isn't something to fear. Silence is something to embrace, because silence is where transformation happens. The greatest growth happens in isolation. The deepest transformation occurs in solitude. The most significant development takes place in silence. When you're alone with your thoughts, alone with your goals, alone with your work, that's when the real magic happens. That's when you evolve from who you were to who you need to be. That's when you're transformed from average to exceptional. But most people can't handle the silence. Most people are afraid of the lonely hours. Most people avoid the unseen grind. They need constant stimulation. They need constant company. They need constant entertainment. They're so uncomfortable with silence that they fill every moment with noise, with distractions, with anything that prevents them from being alone with their thoughts and their work. And that's exactly why they never develop real discipline. That's exactly why they never achieve greatness. That's exactly why they remain average, because they're running from the very thing that could transform them. They're avoiding the very environment that could develop them. They're escaping the very situation that could shape them into champions. Champions run toward the silence. They seek out the lonely hours. They pursue the unseen grind. They understand that silence isn't punishment, it's privilege. It's the privilege of working on yourself without interference. It's the privilege of building yourself without distraction. It's the privilege of becoming yourself without influence. Silence creates discipline, and discipline creates everything else. Discipline creates consistency. Discipline creates excellence. Discipline creates success. Discipline creates achievement. Discipline creates greatness. Everything you want in life flows from discipline. And discipline flows from silence. So if you want success, you need discipline. If you want discipline, you need silence. If you want to be great, you need to embrace the lonely hours. You need to love the unseen grind. You need to celebrate the silent sacrifices, because those are the moments that define you. Those are the hours that develop you. Those are the experiences that transform you. Well, let me tell you about the 6 a.m. grind. The time when champions wake up and the world is silent. The time when nobody's awake to see your effort. The time when nobody's around to applaud your commitment. That's when discipline is at its purest. That's when your choice to work says everything about who you are, because nobody made you get up. Nobody forced you to start. Nobody's checking to see if you're working. You're doing it purely because of the discipline you've developed in the silent CE. And that discipline, that self-imposed, self-motivated, self-sustained discipline, that's the most powerful force in the universe. That's the force that moves mountains. That's the force that breaks barriers. That's the force that achieves the impossible, because it doesn't depend on anything external. It doesn't need favorable conditions. It doesn't require perfect circumstances. It just does what needs to be done. Silence creates discipline by teaching you self-reliance. In the silence, you can't rely on others. You can't depend on external motivation. You can't count on outside encouragement. You have to rely on yourself. You have to depend on your internal drive. You have to count on your self-discipline. And when you learn to rely on yourself, when you learn to depend on your internal drive, when you learn to count on your self-discipline, you become unstoppable. The lonely hours teach you that you have everything you need within you. The unseen grind shows you that you don't need anyone else to be great. The silent sacrifices prove that your success depends on you and nobody else. That's empowering. That's liberating. That's transformative. Transformative. It's when you realize that your greatness doesn't depend on anyone else showing up, doesn't depend on anyone else supporting you, doesn't depend on anyone else believing in you, that's when you become dangerous. That's when you become a force. That's when you become inevitable. Because nothing can stop someone who's willing to do the work in silence. Silence creates discipline, but it also creates clarity. In the noise of everyday life, it's hard to think clearly. It's hard to focus intensely. It's hard to execute effectively. But in the silence, in the lonely hours, in the unseen grind, your mind becomes clear. Your focus becomes sharp. Your execution becomes precise. The silence allows you to hear your own thoughts. The lonely hours allow you to connect with your own vision. The unseen grind allows you to align with your own purpose. When you remove all the external noise, all the external opinions, all the external influences, you can finally hear yourself. You can finally see your path. You can finally understand your purpose. And that clarity, that crystal clear understanding of who you are, what you want, and what you need to do, that clarity breeds discipline. Because when you're clear about your goals, discipline becomes easier. When you're clear about your purpose, sacrifice becomes meaningful. When you're clear about your vision, hard work becomes rewarding. Silence creates discipline by creating focus. In the silence, there are no distractions. There are no interruptions. There are no diversions. It's just you and the work. And that singular focus, that undivided attention, that's what produces excellence. That's what generates mastery. That's what creates greatness. Champions understand this. They protect their silent hours like gold. They guard their lonely moments like treasure. They value their unseen grind like diamonds because they know that's where the real work gets done. That's where real progress gets made. That's where real transformation takes place. You want to be a champion? Learn to love the silence. You want to be great? Learn to embrace the lonely hours. You want to be successful? Learn to celebrate the unseen grind, because that's where discipline is created. That's where character is built. That's where champions are forged. The sacrifices you make in silence are the sacrifices that count. The work you do when nobody's watching is the work that matters. The discipline you demonstrate in the lonely hours is the discipline that lasts, because it's not for show. It's not for recognition. It's not for validation. It's for you. It's for your goals. It's for your dreams. And when you develop that kind of discipline, the kind that exists independently of external factors, you become invincible. You become relentless. You become unstoppable, because your success no longer depends on circumstances. Your progress no longer depends on conditions. Your achievement no longer depends on anyone or anything outside of yourself. Silence creates discipline, and discipline creates destiny. Your destiny isn't determined by your talent. Your destiny isn't determined by your circumstances. Your destiny isn't determined by your opportunities. Your destiny is determined by your disciple line. And your discipline is forged in the sign, challenging you right now. Embrace the silence. Stop running from the lonely hours. Stop avoiding the unseen grind. Stop seeking constant validation and constant company. Learn to be alone with your work. Learn to be comfortable with your goals. Learn to love the silence. Because in that silence, you'll find yourself. In those lonely hours, you'll discover your true power. In that unseen grind, you'll forge unbreakable discipline. And with that discipline, you'll achieve everything you've ever dreamed of. The world is loud. Life is noisy. Everyone's talking. Everyone's posting. Everyone's broadcasting. But champions are silent. They're in the gym. They're at the desk. They're in the lab. They're doing the work that nobody sees, making the sacrifices that nobody knows about, developing the discipline that and when they finally emerge, when they finally reveal what they've been building in the silence, the world stops. People paid attention. Everyone notices because the work they did in silence speaks louder than any words. The discipline they developed in the lonely hours produces results that can't be denied. That's the power of silence. That's the strength of discipline. That's the impact of the unseen grind. So stop talking and start working. Stop broadcasting and start building. Stop performing and start producing. Let the silence shape you. Let the lonely hours develop you. Let the unseen grind transform you into the champion you were born to be. Silence creates discipline. Discipline creates champions. Champions create legacy. And it all starts in the silence. So go find your silence. Go embrace your lonely hours. Go love your unseen grind. Because that's where your greatness is waiting. That's where your destiny is hiding. That's where your championship is being forged. Now go, get in that silence, get in those lonely hours, get in that unseen grind, and let discipline shape you into the champion the world hasn't seen yet. Let's go.